Hello, world.
Hey. Hi.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
It's like I've forgotten how to say hello. Hey, and welcome to this week's episode of Life with CACA. I'm your host and fellow producer, Carolina Gropa. However you found the show, welcome. I am so glad you're here doing this live thing with me. So this week's conversation was actually recorded almost a year ago. Crazy, right? Time. Where does it go? But what I found really fascinating about listening back to this conversation with Mel Jones, the very multi-talented producer and director, is how much of this conversation is still very relevant and applicable to today. It's funny, at the time she reflected on what her life would look like if she could just slow down. And yet, here we are. COVID has forced us all to do just that in many ways. So Mel graduated from Howard University and got her MFA in producing at AFI. She spent 8 years working alongside the legendary producer Stephanie Allain, whom was also a guest on the show, so check out episode 14 if you have not yet heard that. She shares her journey on growing from an assistant to a producer at Homegrown Entertainment. She dives deep into how she became an associate producer on Justin Simeon's Sundance hit, Dear White People, and divulges her secret to being a freaking ray of sunshine. I really enjoyed this conversation. I can't believe it's been a year. If you like the show, please tell a friend, tag a friend, like, subscribe, wherever it is you get your podcast. And without further ado, let's hear from Mel. Yeah, that's some real stuff right there. Okay, so tell me everything about you.
Okay.
You know, your origin story.
Yeah.
Walk me through everything that's happened till get to this moment on CACA's couch.
Okay. Let me give me a second. I'm going to try to do this on the first try. Okay. So, born and raised in Richmond, Virginia.
Which, I want to interrupt. I won't count this out of your 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you.
Because we were talking about this off mic, and I just love that you're from there. Because when I came to America, that's where I lived.
Yeah.
In Richmond, Virginia,
and
Henrico County. What?
Me too.
Yeah. So I just love that because you don't meet a lot of people from Richmond.
No, not from Richmond at all. Where were you coming from?
Brazil.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So you can samba?
I can samba, yes.
I love samba.
I love Brazilian culture. I mean, obviously I'm partial because I'm Brazilian, but you know, it's like not everybody's into all the things that are the sort of stereotypical interest of a culture. But I really am. I love samba. I love dance. I love the food. And it's interesting because so much of it is rooted in African culture.
Yeah.
Different conversation for a different time.
Yeah.
But and when I came to America and I discovered like the African American culture, that was the first thing that I identified with.
Of course, because I mean, if you think about religion, you know, it comes from that African religion. So even how you interact with religion, call and response, all that stuff, same thing. You know, slavery ended very late in Brazil. Yeah. Same thing like here. Like it's a lot of things that make us, and then, you know, the dance, you guys have capoeira.
Capoeira, yeah. I mean, a lot of it, all of the best things about Brazil, I would say, are African. So, anyway.
Here we go. Yes, we'll talk about that later.
Okay, yeah.
I love it.
So, Richmond, Virginia.
Oh, yeah, it's my turn now. Okay. Yeah. I'm from Richmond, Virginia. I am a daughter of a preacher and a teacher. I went to Howard University, Bison.
What?
And came out here to go to AFI as a producing fellow. I knew I wanted to be a storyteller because my dad was a preacher. And I was like, what he's doing is fire, but I'm not about to be a preacher, right? Like how you inspire people, how you can heal people, how you can do all those things through storytelling. That's why I'm here, right? So I could probably change jobs today and do something else as long as it was like story oriented. I wanted to be a photojournalist. I wanted to travel the world and do travel essays and stuff, right? And eat food and like have a good time. Yeah. That was the plan.
That's a great dream. That's my dream too.
Right. And so I'm like, okay, that's what I want to do. And I knew that in college, but my university did not want me to double major in photography and journalism. They were in separate schools and it was too hard and they said I couldn't do it. And so I thought, well, what am I going to do? And what does a producer do? If there's a problem, you solve it. So I go, documentary film. That's in the School of C where journalism is. I'll just do that. And so I ended up doing documentary film, and that's what I got my degree in. And it kind of just naturally moved into like, you know, narrative features that were fictional.
So when you were like, okay, AFI has this program, and I'm sure you looked at USC and all the others. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. What made you choose AFI?
I think because like prior, I knew that I wanted to be a storyteller first, so I thought I wanted to be a DP in the very beginning, and then I realized that they had to report to someone. You know what I mean? And I was like, man, I don't want to do that. And so I thought, who is the boss, right? And it's usually a producer or a director.
Mm-hmm.
And I had directed some stuff in undergrad, like in theater, and I liked it, but it just felt really male dominant, I think. And I thought, and also all the producers were always women. They were always like the badass ladies, like getting everybody, in line. Like that's generally how it was. And I ended up producing a film for a friend of mine who was a dude and really liked it. And so once I had done that, I was working at like the Discovery Channel as a tape librarian. And I was like, this is not going to be my life. Like, it's not going to be my life. And so after doing that project with him and like, I got to order equipment and I got to like hear about what the DPs were doing. And I got to talk to like the production designer and hear what the production designer was doing. And I got to figure out like what about the script wasn't working or wasn't going to be feasible because our budget wouldn't allow for it. I got to do all of those things that I found to be interesting in one job. And like after having that experience of producing a short, because before that it was documentary stuff.
Right. Different.
I was like, I could do everything and I get to be with it forever. You know what I mean? Like as a DP, you shoot it and then you go home and you come back, maybe color it, and like everybody comes in stages and leaves, but like you could be with it the whole time. And I think that was like what made me want to do it. And so I chose AFI because it is a school that is a conservatory. You learn the craft of the one particular thing you came there to do.
And so define a producer.
It's a person that makes shit happen. All the shit happen. Usually when I describe a producer, I would say a producer is like the mama of the movie. Like the director's like the dad and the producer's like the mom. And like the mom a lot of times gives birth to the baby in terms of maybe develop the script ahead of time before even finding a director, found the money, like makes it grow into a thing that will be a thing. And then also has to, for a lot of times in a lot of relationships, and obviously there's some relationships, there's no dad, but like, in like heterosexual relationship, you have the dad that's usually like fun and, everybody likes to be around them and like they get to do the fun stuff and like everybody, like get all the praise. Like, oh, yep. You're the best dad ever because you're doing things that moms always do. Like that's like kind of the thing. And then as a producer, like as the mom, you're the one that has to say no and you're the one that has to discipline and you're the one that has to like keep this train going on the track, like if you got an ADHD kid, you got to make sure the services come in or like you have to kind of work whatever the problem is you need to solve, right?
Yeah.
So like I think that's how I look at it, like the mom of a movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was great. Great response. I'm curious how your perceptions of what you thought maybe producing was going to be like before you were doing it full time and how they are different from what you thought they were. Like how many years into your journey are you now? Like
I've been here for 11 years.
Okay. So you're an OG like me. Right. So, like when you came here and you had like AFI stars in your eyes,
right.
and then you went through the program and you had a whole perception or idea in your mind of what you thought that path or that lifestyle was going to be. And here you are 11 years later. Talk about that. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting because I had, and I don't fault her and I'm not upset, but like I had a producing teacher who told me, you're such a great producer. I don't know if you should focus on only telling stories about people of color because you won't make money that way. Right. And I remember being like, damn, like, well, who's going to tell the stories then?
Right. But did you set out to be like, I'm going to only tell stories
I
of
wanted
color?
to. Yeah. I mean, because like, again, like the reason why I came into it was like, because I do see stories as like a vehicle for healing and for change and for connection. And so, especially being a woman and being a woman of color, there's a lot of disconnect by the way that we're seen and the way that we see ourselves. And sometimes we can see ourselves the way that we're seen, right?
Yeah.
And so it was really important for me to like delve into that and to tell those types of stories. And that's particularly why I've made mostly independent films up until this point. And they don't make a lot of money and they're really hard. But I feel like those films made a difference culturally. And that's what the payment was for me. So back then, like 11 years ago, being Black wasn't cool on film. Like, now it's like all the wave.
Right.
But then it wasn't. And I think that conversation prepared me a lot for what I would come to experience, in my first few years out here, just trying to get my footing after finishing AFI. Just how do I do the thing I want to do when it's not like the coolest thing? And what do I have to sacrifice, or how do I figure that thing out? And I think some people just get incredibly lucky. Like they happen, and I think luck is being prepared and being at the right place at the right time.
The Oprah quote.
Yes, right? Yeah. It's true, And like I just so happened to be a part of a mentorship program where the producer who was my mentor was Stephanie Allain.
Just real quick, can you let the audience know who she is and why that's a big deal?
That's a big deal. Okay. That is a big deal because Stephanie Allain is like the original, Black woman producer, and like the original badass in general. So she produced Boys in the Hood. She's done movies like Black Snake Moan. She's done Hustle and Flow, Something New, and the list goes on and on. We've done together Dear White People. We did Burning Sands that went to Sundance and was like one of the first class of Netflix originals, and a couple other titles. And so everybody knows her, and she's a legend. Right. Like people kiss the ring. Right?
Yeah, and I would say that she's a legend not just within sort of like the African American community. She's someone that on a global scale, like everybody knows her name.
Yeah, like it's not just she's in the Black world and she's a Black producer. She's a producer, and she uses her platform to talk about a lot of the things that I care about. And so when she became my mentor, I became fortunate enough to be able to do what I wanted to do right off the jump, basically. Like I had a 1-year stint working at Participant Media, which again is a company around social issues and all that stuff. Not as much about race, if you count the help, but like, but
Sorry, I snorted.
But like,
so you guys got to see her face. I wish I had that recorded.
No, you need to get a video camera.
I gotta start doing that.
But like, they were also just about talking about things that were important, and that's what I wanted to use media for, And so I did that for a year, but my boss like left / got fired. I have no idea what happened to her. She disappeared from the industry.
Whoa.
And you usually go with your boss to the next place, but she went into obscurity. And so I didn't have a job, and I didn't have anything. And Stephanie called one day to be like, hey, would you work with me for the LA Film Festival? And so I was able to, by day, work at the film festival, where I learned a lot about, in the same way that like I learned at AFI, because at AFI there were 150 of us and there were 4 Black people in my class, right? And I learned like, oh, this is going to be a thing, like this is, where we would get questions like, why do you guys all sit together? Or we would be like, well, there's no faculty like that is of color here, and they're like, well, what's the problem with that? And now since then they've obviously changed, but I think like going through that and then being at a festival too and seeing how people look at work that is not a part of their experience and looking at like the dynamics that are in a room when you're choosing and not seeing yourself represented, and then now understanding why festivals may not play a bunch of films of diverse backgrounds made by people of diverse backgrounds. It's mostly because that's not who's choosing the film.
Right.
And so I learned like, okay, if that's happening on the festival, and that's how you discover all your filmmakers, right? If that's happening on the film festival circuit, then that's what's also happening in Hollywood, right? So, because they're getting fed these people from the festival, they're the gatekeepers, right? But then also like the agents and the managers and all these people,
and the buyers and
everybody. Yep. We're all kind of being fed through this system that isn't very diverse. Yeah. It's supposed to be so indie, but it's only kind of specific to particular groups. So I think working with Stephanie at the film festival while like moonlighting as producers together, because like Film Independent was paying our bills, right? You know what I mean? Like she had been chilling, like she'd done her thing. She was home in her garden, like living her best life, before Film Independent called her and said, would you be the head of the festival? So she wasn't really as active either. And so both of us were like, okay, like now we're here. She has this stage, like all these people are calling her, they know her. And so we were able to kind of leverage our relationships with some of changed the festival, and I think in a great way.
Yeah.
Then it died after we left. But
yeah, like what's happening with the festival?
It's gone.
It ended, right?
Yeah, it died.
They stopped doing it.
They just stopped doing it. You know, I'm not privy to any of the insider stuff anymore because I'm not
crazy.
there anymore. But yeah, it definitely left the building, which is sad, you know, because we don't have any big kind of festival in Los Angeles
which
anymore.
Is ridiculous.
Yeah. It's making way for something new to be created.
True.
Know, something else better, and probably just more of the times will step in its place. But yeah, for now, it's
dang.
So some of the criticism around it was that while we were there, it skewed away from quote unquote good films or critically acclaimed films and played, you know, diverse films that were diverse for the sake of being diverse but subpar. Like those were some of the criticisms that would come, which are really like interesting conversations to have, because when you're looking at you know, even in Hollywood, if I'm making a film, a love movie, two people, whatever, and I'm asking for a budget, I'm not going to get the same money that it's going to be if it's like a white dude and a white girl. Mm-hmm. And so that changes like the production value, that changes some of what it becomes, you know?
Yeah.
So there's a question around resources and how we even look at a film and judge it. And what is most important about a movie that I think has to be taken into account in all the time when you're looking at a film that's given less resources. That happens on a studio level. And it happens on a straight up, I'm asking my mom and dad, this is what my, you know, generational wealth looks like picture as well. So, I mean, that was a long digression. I don't even remember the question. I don't even remember.
No, it's good. We went to an important place. We were talking about why Stephanie Allain is a big deal.
Right.
And
then I went down this whole thing about this festival and stuff.
And the festival, which, you know, she was connected to that and how you connected with her and the luck involved in that.
Yeah, totally. Because I got out here in 2008, right? And that was like the writer's strike. And then 2010 was the recession. So one of the things that I did was I was going to line produce stuff for people, right? Mm-hmm. Because I had that skill from learning it at AFI. So that was probably going to be the path that I would have gone down, which wasn't exactly what I would have imagined. Because, you know, when we were in school, they were like, you become an assistant to a producer, then you become a producer. The end. Like, that's what they said you do, right? So I was like, okay.
That's a lie.
Yeah, and that's
not a lie. But
no, but it's not true at all. That happened with me. But that don't really happen. And it really doesn't happen because there's so much competition, and like mentorship is not always like part of someone's personal kind of identity and what they choose to do with their time. It's also like when someone sees you in a certain light, it's very hard for them to move outside of that and see you differently. So if you've been giving them coffee and taking their phone calls, it's really hard for them to see the value in you as a CE or a producer later on until you leave and come back. That's usually what happens.
Right. They need to reset.
Validated by somebody else.
Yeah.
Then you come back and then they hire you at a higher
position.
And
then they'll be like, I was the one who found
Exactly. But they don't normally like, you don't go from that person who taught you how to do everything and they think that you need all this help, and people aren't checking for your growth.
I think it's just that it's like when you can deliver and do a thing that makes their lives easier, why are they going to promote you?
Yeah.
It's not even necessarily malicious. I think it's selfish in that perspective of like, it's so hard to train someone and get someone who's got like the energy for it. So when you find someone,
you're going to keep them right there.
You're going to keep them right there. It's a really weird business that's so relational based, which is why like every path is so freaking unique, because it
depends on who you meet.
It's
when
like,
you meet them, how you meet them.
Exactly.
Because I have met people in certain circumstances and they don't even remember that they've met me. And then when they meet me in another circumstance, they're like, oh my God, it's so great to meet. And they remember me from that instance, you know? And it's like about the whole amalgamation of like how anything comes to be determines how someone feels about you, what they think, how they regard you. Like if they meet you on a red carpet, that's one thing. If they meet you at a coffee shop, there's another thing. If they meet you as an assistant, it's one thing. If they meet you as a producer, it's another thing. Because that was a dichotomy I dealt with, like working with Stephanie. I was her assistant at the LA Film Festival. I was her producing partner by the end.
At Homegrown.
You know what I mean? At Homegrown. So depending on how someone met me, that would be how much they valued their experience with me.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like my relationship with Stephanie is like a great example of that. So I'm part of this program called Project Involve at Film Independent. People who don't know about it, they should look it up. It's a great resource for women and people of color and LGBT LGBTQIA plus people and everybody. So like anybody who doesn't really have a really strong voice in the industry has an opportunity to make a movie and get a mentor. So I asked for her, knowing that she was a part of the board and that she would be easy to get to. And because I knew that she was awesome, right? So I was like, she's awesome. They're not going to spend, 6 months trying to get the assistant to respond. And I could like learn something from this woman. So she does, coincidentally enough, again, who I didn't know this was going to happen. She was asked to deliver the welcoming speech to the class, like to our class of fellows. So I'd already asked them, could she be my mentor before they had decided to invite her. And so they were like, let's just corner her at this thing. You know what I mean? And I'm like, yes,
Great idea.
So we corner her at the thing. And I mean, anybody who knows Stephanie, she can have like this face where like people are scared of her. Like they'll be like,
she's got a good poker face.
Yeah.
I've met her at Sundance and she can be real.
Yeah. Like people really, are like, oh, how is she? I'm like, she's fine, but she can just turn it off, right? And so we come up to her and poker faces on. They want something. She knows it, so she's like, guards her up. And so she's like, they're like, this is Mel. She asked for you to be a producer, be her producing mentor. Can you do it? Do you have time? She's like, yeah, fine. Okay, sure. Like, I'll be your mentor. So basically what you really get out of mentorship is like 2 meetings and maybe a phone call, like at the very least, like that's what they're signing up for. And that's what a lot of people got, 2 meetings and a phone call. And then if you're able to build a relationship, that's great, but that's not always, everybody doesn't match up like that. So that's what it seemed like it was going to be on that day. Like I was going to talk to her 2 times on the phone. Like I probably wasn't ever going to see her again in person.
Yeah.
But we ended up on the elevator together. And again, it was like so awkward. She did not want to say anything to me. And it was just the 2 of us. And we went our separate ways. But she gave me her email on the elevator. So I made another short for a friend of mine who was at Columbia College that I loved. And it came out so well. It's called A Christmas Tree. And so I sent her the Christmas tree because I felt like, okay, well, I'll send her something so she knows I'm not like lame.
Just chilling.
Yeah, you know what I mean?
You're doing the work.
Yeah, I'm working on stuff. And I did this on my own. Like, it wasn't for a project. I didn't get any like credit. Like, nobody at school made me do it. And so then she emailed me, come over to my house. And it went from, maybe you'll get a phone call, see you later, sucker, to, oh, you're actually a producer. And like, you made a film that was good. And I see something. Come over. And that's like what started our relationship. And just by doing that and showing her that like, you can, and this is something she taught me later. Like, I don't even know that was my process. But what she taught me later, and which is what I demonstrated without knowing I was demonstrating, is like, you can talk to me or not. I'm going to be doing stuff, right? That's how we go into every room when we pitch stuff. Like, that's how we approach every situation. It's going to happen whether you are a part of it or not.
Right.
So you want to jump on this train, Right. And I think that's what, like, I was like, here, this is what I'm doing. And so speaking to, like, how you meet people, how people relate to you based on when and how you meet them.
Yeah.
Like, I was a thirsty, fellow in one second, and I was a producer in another.
Yeah, but I think to your point, like a lot of what I've built for myself as a producer, I didn't go to AFI, I didn't go to school for it. I just kind of found my way, was a lot of not like cornering someone necessarily, but cold emailing people, finding the people that I responded to, whose work I connected with, that I wanted to learn from, and finding unique ways to get to them. And I think it's so important because I get a lot of like these cold emails, and now that I'm not like on the other side by any means, right. I'm still like trying to find my way, but like there's a perception of me that's different because I've, produced things. I got credits. I've produced things. I got an Emmy nomination. So people look at me and they think like I must have some secret answer, right? But people will spend a lot of time emailing you, but they are just asking for something. Yeah. Right? There's no give. And so to me, I think the difference in it, to sort of parallel with what you're saying, is to email someone or find a contact for someone, which now you can do online, right? So easy. And say, hey, you should know me. You should meet me. And it's like, well, why? Right? And just to say you're like a hungry person who wants to learn or shadow someone or take them out for coffee isn't enough. It's like, be doing you, go do the work, even if it's crappy, be doing stuff.
Yeah.
And then you have something to send those people so you can say, hey, I'm a fan of your work. This is why I want to meet you. Here's stuff I've done that I think is in the vein of the stuff you produce or the stuff you create.
And I want to talk about that.
And I want to talk about that, right? And even if they don't respond today, maybe a year later, there's something else. 2 years later, there's something else.
Never know.
And then when they go look your name up in their Gmail search bar, they'll be like, oh, this
person emailed
she's
me.
been emailing me since 2009.
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying?
Uh-huh.
So I think it's so important that if you're gonna like advocate for yourself, then truly have something you bring to the table.
Or to pick their brain. One thing that Stephanie says is like, I need my brain.
Yeah, don't pick
want
it.
you to pick it.
I mean, it's part of why, like, personally, these conversations are selfishly very interesting. But I hope that by getting to learn your story, other people can feel like they're picking your brain through this conversation, even though they don't get to be in the room and ask you the questions.
I mean, I think that's what podcasts are about in general. You know, I think because like I could do this for 2 hours, right?
Yeah.
And then I could go home to my kid. I cannot meet with every person for 2 hours.
No. You know that's why I'm the lucky one.
Thank you so much. You know what I mean? Like for doing this so that I can help. Because I remember this is like, I talk a lot. But like on Instagram, I had somehow gotten on a Visa commercial, right? Friend of mine who's a producer, because I know a lot of producers, she's a commercial producer, and she named Kate Rogan, and she, who you should probably talk to.
I'd love to talk to her.
I'll put you in contact with her.
Yeah.
And so she called me and said, hey, Visa's doing these commercials. They need some diversity. You know what I'm saying? Don't, go in there.
Like behind the scenes.
No.
Diversity. Oh, on camera. Okay.
They wanted to talk to women who were in the film industry.
Oh, I saw this commercial when I looked you up. Yep.
And so they're like, come in. And so I'm in there. It's like all white women, right? I'm the only one. And everybody's like, this is my second interview, second, audition. And I'm like, y'all know I'm gonna get it right. Like, I just knew it. And they were like, you're such an asshole. I was like, it's not my fault they don't know any black people, you know what I mean? But like, and we had like a good laugh out of it. And the truth was that was what happened.
Mm-hmm.
Like they were like, the casting company just didn't have it together enough to find the right people. And so, but the whole point was when I got up there, I had said like, I really do like to give people opportunities. Like, that's why I like to be a producer. Part of what drives me, apart from like what it does on the outside, like socially, like on the big kind of macro scale, is that on the micro scale, I can give somebody their first job. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Who is totally prepared and totally able and totally gonna kick ass, but nobody sees them. They don't even see them. Not even sees that they're worth it. They just don't see them.
Right.
And so like, that's a big deal. And I pride myself in being able to do that. So I said that on a daggone Visa commercial. Do you know my Instagram was lit up? Like everybody was caught.
Do you see me now?
Yeah. Do you see me? I need a job. Can you help me? And I was like, oh my God, like what am I gonna do? Yeah. And I think I got back to every single person. Like I didn't give everybody a job. I connected some people to other people I thought that would be more helpful for like what they were doing. But it was like, you know what I mean? They were like, oh, you said it, so I'm here.
Put it out there, yeah.
Yeah. So and it is one of those things where I was like, I didn't mean it like that. You know what I mean? Like I meant it like I know you and I see you as a PA and I'm gonna give you a job as a coordinator. Yeah. I didn't mean like like off Instagram, I'm just gonna play like I'm a temp agency.
Look, it's
you
not...
know what I mean? Like
okay, let's talk about Dear White People because your title is associate producer. And just for the listeners, can you explain what that means in the context of an independent film such as Dear White People, which if you haven't seen the original movie, I highly recommend. I've only been to Sundance once. I just really wanted to go to Sundance wanted an excuse. And I actually, fun story, I volunteered and on the opening night, I was part of the opening night film that year. And Ava DuVernay at the time was like blowing up, like Middle of Nowhere had come out a few years ago. This is like 2014, 2015. And I had known of her and she was like big on the Twitter and we had connected on the Twitter and had emailed back and forth, but I never met her. And I was the usher basically putting people in their little seats. And who comes in?
Oh my God.
Ava. And she is there. And I'm like, oh, it's Ava. And I don't get starstruck or like verklempt by a lot of people. I've met a lot of people. But Ava for me, even before.
She was like huge. She's
already
a force. Yeah.
She's a force, and she's an energy, and she's magnetic, and she's just a unique person. And so I was like, oh my God, there's Ava. And I was like, I went up to her and I was like, hello, and I will take you to your seat. And she was like, okay. And then when I went to put her in her seat, I was like, hey, by the way, I just want to say, like, I'm Carolina, like we emailed. And she's like, Carolina Gropa? And she like touched me, and I was like, you know my last name? And I remember feeling like, I've made it, Mom.
Yeah, like
I'm volunteering at Sundance, and Ava DuVernay knows my name, right? Yep. Like I didn't even have a film there, but all that to say that it was so special to be recognized. And then I left that screening and then went to the Dear White People screening, and that film changed the landscape of everything
TV,
for a lot of people, but particularly we had never seen Black stories like that before.
Not at all.
It was so cool to be like sort of arm's length from people like Lena and Justin, who were sort of on the cusp of what they became, what they've become, and to know them then. And
so how I came into Dear White People is it was through an AFI Connect. So Justin and Lena had been working on the script for a while. And Stephanie says that like they had sent a really bad draft of it to her years prior. So she wasn't inclined to read like what they had. And I didn't know any of this. I just knew I was a new assistant, and like I wasn't about to give her like set up a meeting with them because I think they had called and they wanted to have a meeting. I was like, I can't do that unless I know that, what the script is. So they had been calling. I was like, okay, I'll try to get you in with her. But like, we're doing all this stuff in the festival. And my friend simultaneously from AFI called from Sony, and they had their script at Sony. And she was like, they're never going to do anything with it. Nelly Rafai, she called me. You got to read this thing, though. It's good. So she sends it to me, and I read it. I'm like, oh my God, this is amazing, right? Yeah. And like, Justin we had worked together at Participant Media. He was over in like the kind of take part side, though, and I was working in the film development side.
Because he was in marketing for a while, wasn't he?
Yeah,
PR
he was
marketing.
Publicist. Yeah. And then Angel Lopez.
I know Angel.
Yeah, he was like my boss. He was like under my boss, so he was my boss. And so I was like, oh my God, I know these people. You know what I mean? Like, this is awesome. So I gave the script to Stephanie, and I was like, Stephanie, you've got to read. You have to read this. This is so good, because I knew they wanted to meet with her, and I wanted to set them up. I was like, you got to read this. So she didn't read it, right? She was just like, I kept pressing her, like I would send it to her every like week. She never read it. Then they made, and that's the whole thing about The Train is Moving. They made their campaign, their Indiegogo campaign, and they were like, we're doing this thing, and people are going to give us money. And, the title, Dear White People, just, caught fire, and everybody was like, look, like, what is this thing? And so, of course, her young daughter at the time, maybe like not even out of high school yet, like 17 or so, was like, look at this. This is awesome. And she's like, Mel, have you seen this? And I'm like, of course I have. You have the script in your inbox, right? And so she's like, what? And she reads the script. She's like, call him in, And so we ended up meeting. And so there were like all these meetings about how are you going to make this movie? Like went to Focus, went to all these places. And finally, I think the money came from, again, Julie Lebedev, who happened to be the assistant before me on Jonathan's death, right? Like no one knew she was a Russian princess. I mean, I didn't know. I mean, they knew, but I didn't know, right? She was just learning, And like, so she funded the movie, and we brought on Effie because at the same time I became pregnant, and at the same time we had another movie that was going to shoot at the exact same time in LA called Beyond the Lights, a Gina Prince Bythewood movie. Yeah. So we weren't going to be able to go on set. So we called Effie, and Effie handled all
She crushed it.
Yeah, all the physical production, figured out how to make that whole thing work. Go out to Minnesota and like killed it, and they made the movie. And then after that, it was just like, okay, where does it go? And we got it into the LA Film Festival, obviously, because we were there. Yeah, and it deserved to be there. But like we made sure it had like the biggest. Like I remember I got a call from Lena, and she was like, it was something about cars. Lena has always been Lena, right? Like whether she had like, everybody knows who she is or not, she knew she was the biggest star on the planet, right? Yeah. So she was like, I think that like it was Audi. I don't know what car brand it was, but car sponsor, I don't think was going to pick her up or whatever it was. And she was like, she called me, I need a car, And I was like, all right, we're going to get you a car. She was like, yeah, like this is like huge. Right? But everything she did, she put so much like heart into it. So she's like, this is my baby. Like I'm getting in this car and I'm getting to this, and this is going to be the thing. And I need to get there early. And I just remember being like, all right, we got you. You're going to get there. We'll find the car. And we had the big premiere. And then lo and behold, the TV show, I think like a few months later came into being. And
it was an avalanche of amazing things.
Yeah, but it was like literally, again, the right time at the right place. My friend Lily happened to be at Sony.
Yeah.
She happened to send me this script.
Yeah.
And I happened to read it because you don't always read everything that everybody gives you, especially when it's like not required reading for work. You know, like you don't usually have time. But I was like, let me read this thing. Because like associate producer means a lot of things. Like some associate producers damn near like are the AD, the crafty person, like they're driving the truck, you know, like they fill like every hole that ever exists on an indie film. That's some of them. You know, some associate producers like put $5 in the movie or whatever,
right?
To give you the extra bump so you can make it, and they'll get it, like just like with producing credits. But for me, it was being able to connect them to Stephanie and moving that train, like making sure that she paid attention to it so that it could get done, you know, being that connective tissue for that time. I was making no money at the festival. I was making $35,000 at the festival, and I wasn't gonna make any money off of this movie. And she was like, "For the work you did, you deserve a credit." And that's something that like a lot of people don't do. They don't do that. You know, they're like, well, I'm going to get you for all your worth. And if you're not going to ask for it, I'm not going to give it to you.
Sometimes you have to ask and you still don't get it.
Yeah. And you have to like basically demand. Like if you beg, you're not going to get it. But if you're like, okay, I'm leaving because you don't value me, maybe you'll get it and maybe you'll have to leave. You know what I mean? Like, for me, it was it changed my trajectory, I feel, by doing that and having that and being able somebody to write about it or for it to be up somewhere. Even changed her perception of me by having that credit. You know, like what she thought. I was an AFI, I'm associate producer. I could do that in my dream. You know what I mean? Like, but I was her assistant, you know, so she had no contextualization around what that meant. But for other people to call me that, it even changed how we related, because the next movie we made, I was a producer on it. Yeah. Why? Because that's the next step.
Right. It never ceases to amaze me how small this and tiny our industry is, especially like the producing side of it. Because I don't know if you remember, but we had a call last year, you and I, you, me, and Stephanie for a project. Yeah. For whatever reason, I think I wasn't available for all the dates. But it's just, you know what I'm saying? And like years prior, I sort of randomly met Stephanie, and I know like all of these people that you sort of tangentially know, you end up crossing paths with time and time again.
Over and over.
So being a good person, a person of integrity who's going to show up for others and know your worth and ask and demand your worth, it may be really uncomfortable in those moments, but it goes
like if I hadn't have said, like if I wouldn't have a little bit I didn't have to, like, she said it already. So I just was like, you said you would. Yeah. I know, you know, like, because everybody has a different idea of like what people's contributions are, right?
Well, and it raises this cool explanation of how the reason there are so many producer credits, and I'll speak specifically of indie film because television's a whole other world, is because there are different people who bring different things to the table and get different credits and have to be acknowledged. And sometimes, unfortunately, you know, you're giving a credit to like the actor's best friend because they're just on set and they did nothing. But sometimes it's someone who's been trying to move a boulder up the mountain to get the movie to a place where it's greenlit and financed so that you can come in and have a job, you know? So is that person's contribution any less than the physical production, right? The physical producer who was there every day for 16 hours. It's a different grind. So it's like, I never played organized sports, but if you were to think of like a team, it's like at some point you got to pass the ball to the next person. Yeah. And you got to put people on your team that are just going to like, when it's their turn to shine, they're going to go. They're going to do it.
So, but to that point, like I think about Burning Sands because there are 4 producers on that, right? By the time we got to that movie, Gerard McMurray, who I love to death, he had taken it. First, Jason Berman got a hold of it, I think, through Sundance because he had met Gerard through Ryan Coogler. And he was like, I'm attaching myself because Jason does know how to find very good work, but he wasn't able to push it, you know, and it, like sometimes it's timing, right? Because it was a movie about hazing, but like at an HBCU, and it had already been like, what was it called? The Go or it was the basically white version that had just gone to Sundance. Yeah. So everyone's like, well, why would anybody? Well, we already have one.
Can't have one. Can't have more than one.
And like, does a black one mean more or anything? Yeah, we have a white one.
Yet how many like procedural shows do we need? Right.
Right. We got like, a million of them. And people keep.
You can only have one movie about one topic at a time. It's weird.
So that was kind of, I think, the issue too. So he's like trying to do it. And Gerard's like, I'm a director. I meant to be a director, but I haven't directed my movie yet. You know, that's how he's approaching the world. And he's talking to agents. He's talking to actors like he's making the movie tomorrow from 3 years ago, you know? Mm-hmm. So then it gets to Reggie Hudlin. And Reggie's like, I love this. You know, he made House Party. So he's like, okay, this is awesome. This is definitely a different thing. There's nothing funny about our movie, but it's still about this experience. So he's like, I'm in it. You know, what can I do? You know, and so now Jason and Reggie are working together, but they're also very busy people, and this is an indie film, and it has, you know. So he gives it to he gives it to all of us, and we know about each other, kind of. Stephanie gets it first from Ryan Coogler and gives it to me and says, you went to an HBC, you tell me if it's good. You know what I mean? And I'm like, this is great. We definitely have to do it. And then we're like trying to set meetings, and we're like, wait a minute, somebody's already gone there. Because Gerard's just like, whoever can do it, I'm just going to go with them, right? And we're like, no, okay, let us all talk about what's happening here. And we all got together. Jason had done whatever he'd done. You know what I mean? Like, we didn't get the money 3 years ago, and there were other things that were problem, like casting or whatever. But he kept it alive, at least even if it was just Gerard's hope that the movie got made because there's a producer that believed in it. Like, it was alive, right? And then Reggie Hudlin also brought like a certain validity to it, you know, like he's Reggie Hudlin. Yeah. And then by the time we got there, with all four of us now producing this movie, when we took it to Netflix, who had passed on it previously, they were like, maybe we shouldn't do that. You know what I mean? Like, maybe we should make this movie. And everybody played very different roles. Like, I was the only one on set. You know, Reggie Hudlin was making a movie of his own. He was making Marshall at the time. Jason Berman hates to be on set, just in general. That's just not his thing. You know, like, he likes to make the deals and like the thing, but like being on set gives him like major anxiety. So he was there in his car when he was there. You know what I mean? Yeah. And so that was like what he did all the contracts and, you know, did the deal with Netflix and kind of dealt with all the kind of nitty gritty of all the deal. And then Stephanie was producing a TV show with Lionsgate that happened to have the same dates as we did. And so I was the only one on set. So like, you know, but I was not going to get that movie made. Like, you know what I mean? Like, no one was going to give me that movie to make without those other three names attached. There was no doubt after that movie how important multiple producers are because of the things they bring, even if they're not on set every day. Right. You know what I mean? I wouldn't have been able to get to set every day without all three of them. Yep. You know what I mean? I think that's one thing that I've been able, especially because at this point I've made 5 movies, right? So like, I've been able to look at it because, you know, you get kind of irritated when like randos get producing credits, and people sometimes, I think, devalue what it is when they give the credits away so easily. Right. I think there's like a really like fine line. Like, you can't get all precious about it because you need to give people recognition for whatever they've done, right? Well, it dilutes the title of producer, which has already been sort of taken apart and little pieces sort of sprinkled throughout a whole process. But I think if you have, like I said, the contributions that make sense and you're an integral part of getting that thing to the point where someone else can be running that show, then great. But to just give it away, and I get sometimes there's politics and deal points and all of this stuff that's out of our control, but it just dilutes it, and it makes it hard when, you know, your parents ask you like, so how do you do this again? And why are there 15 of you on this credit list? And it's like, well, there's like 8 production companies, and it's like, you know, it gets real. It's like, what did you actually do? Right. Yeah. Meanwhile, you're the person that's on set. And if you're the one on set, you're like, I did everything for those 5 months, you know? Right. But the good thing about it though, is like at least for me, is because I took 2 films back to Virginia, because being a mom and making movies, you gotta figure it out. So I called the film office. The reason why I ended up running this show in the first place is because I was like, all right, dudes, I called the film office in Virginia. They're going to give us money. And they're going to give us more money than anybody else is going to give us. And this is where I want to go because my mom lives here. My dad lives here. This is where you get free childcare. Yeah, like, this is where we're doing this. And no one could argue. They didn't care. I mean, a lot of times people don't care about you and your kid, but the money doesn't lie. Right. And so we got, you know, the Virginia Film Office is like, yeah, hometown girl, come on, you know, we'll give you the money. And I've done that twice. And that's partly how I've been able to do this is to take the films to Virginia and make them there.
Well, it takes a village. Like no one person does it alone.
You cannot. It's not even possible.
It's a team collaborate.
It's the most collaborative job, more collaborative than I think. And having directed, right? Because I did direct and went to Sundance and all this stuff. Having directed and having producing is far more collaborative than directing is. And you need your people skills. You need your like intuition. You need your conflict resolution and management skills so much more profoundly than you need it as a director. You still need it, but like, at least for me, and I can't speak for everyone, but for me, that has been my experience. All of those skills are so necessary as a producer.
You have to constantly be massaging and tailoring the conversation and the approach to how you're going to ask for what you want from person A, and it's different from how you're going to talk to person B. It's a lot of that finesse and that I think life skill you really only get by doing and understanding the different sort of personality archetypes and the similarities where some people are this way of operating or seeing things and hearing information and others are this way. And as you do it more, you start to see the patterns, right? Yeah. And while every project there's a lot of similarities, it's still so different.
They're like kids. That's why I always come back. Movies are like kids. You know, they're human beings. Like kids are all human. Right. So they all have like basic functions the same, but they're not the same person. They have different personalities. They have different challenges. They have different things that you love about them, different things that annoy you, but like they're not the same. And like no movie. And I think that's what is also so attractive to me about making movies and about producing movies is that like it's never going to be the same because it just can't be. No two people are alike. Yeah. And that's what's so exciting about it because you never know what you're going to get.
Yeah. So you seem to be a very optimistic, happy person. Yeah. So how this happened to you? How have you been this way? Is it just genetic?
You know, I don't know. Like, and this might be TMI. I'd never really, maybe like when I was going through like puberty, I felt depressed. But I'd never really felt like real depression before until like maybe 2 months ago. Oh. And I was like,
welcome.
Thanks, dude. I feel like it's opened me up to so much more storytelling abilities. Though. Really? I still see it as a positive. But it was fucking awful.
What happened?
Well, a lot of things happened. Like, so me and Stephanie split. It wasn't a bad split, but I had been with her for 8 years. The other part of it was, which is crazy, and I tell everybody about it now because before I was so just like frustrated that I wouldn't talk about it. But like, so my daughter had done one Target ad when she was 6 months old. Okay. You have to get a Coogan account. And for those who don't know what a Coogan account is an account to protect children from their parents who might take their money. In order to get a check, you have to put a percentage of that money. It goes directly there from the employer of your child. It never passes into the parent's hands. So we had this account for her for that one thing, never did anything else again. I have these financial advisors. And when I make a movie, they will pay my regular bills for me because it don't happen. So my car will get repossessed. Not because I don't have the money, I'm making a movie. Yeah. But because I'm not paying attention to anything that has
You're
to do
in the vortex.
Yeah, with my life. So I've learned over the course of a few movies that like this is like beneficial. And so they do that. So Bank of America had gotten sued because they were basically, even though the account was to protect children, they were taking huge fees out of the kid's account. So maybe she made $700. 5 years later, there was $40 in the account. Right? So they get sued and they can't do it anymore. So they changed the name of the accounts to personal savings accounts. Right? But they're still Coogan accounts. And when they do that, their system connects the accounts to your online banking. So my financial advisors put my savings, some money for taxes, all the stuff. I was like, I don't want to touch this amount of money. Can you put it in my savings? They put it in my child's Coogan account.
Oh, no.
I didn't know for months because I wasn't touching it. I now realize I don't have like my savings and that at some point the bit of money that I just have in my accounts is going to run out. Right. And like, I don't have this money. And I call like lawyers and like, there's been like, it was like a 6 or 7 month thing where I thought I was going to get it out. I never did. It never came out because it's to protect kids. You have to go through court. Like the Bank of America would not do it because they're like, it's your error, even though they had renamed the account. And like all the lawyers that I called were like, you're never going to see that money again. Like trust attorneys were like, I don't want to take $5,000 more from you. Like that was like everyone's kind of thing. So I became deeply depressed. I don't know exactly. It was like not having money and not working in the same capacity that I had before.
Powerlessness, right?
I was
so
like,
out of your control.
I was on the couch, like just sitting there. But what it taught me was like, one, there's nothing you can do about certain things. Like you, as much as you try to protect yourself from like hardship, it doesn't matter. Something as crazy as that can happen to show you that like you have to be at some point, you have to be vulnerable at some point. Like vulnerability is just a thing. And good things can come out of it. I started to realize that like money wasn't that important because obviously I make any films. Like I'm not like out here trying to be rich or whatever. Like that's not I'd love to be rich. I'd love I'd love to be rich. But like I'm not out here like that's not my motivation. Being defined by like what you have and what you've done and what you're doing is not a good thing to do. And just because I have made a movie every year for like 5 years, it just had become part of my identity. And we were supposed to make, Stephanie and I were supposed to make the Shirley Chisholm movie in March, and it fell apart, right? And I'm like, okay, we're gonna make this movie. I don't have to worry about that $40,000. Then the movie fell apart because like we couldn't get the timing right. Viola had to go back and I was just like, what is going on? You know what I mean? And like, I couldn't get unemployment. It was like every single thing that could go wrong went wrong. And I think it was really like, I was so angry about the situation. I couldn't let go of the anger and I turned it inside. Like I was angry at myself for it happening. And then what do? You get depressed. I've read a good article that anger turned inward is depression. In my professional life, what it has also taught me is not to define myself by the things that I do. Like, I think I've also even realized that as much as I love producing, especially with my daughter, I have more time at home and stuff. You know what I mean? Like I did because I was like, in the depressed zone, but I was like, man, like, what would my life be like if I could slow it down? But yeah, I think that like in general, the happiness is about learning from my mistakes.
I love it. I love it. No, it's great. How do you think that one stays relevant in an industry that's constantly changing?
That's a good question because that was one of the things that I was like also struggling with. Like, I think as long as you're happy with what you're doing, you'll keep doing it. Like people will be happy with working with you and you'll keep finding opportunities and stuff. Like being a part of a community is important. Like, you need to have a community of friends and people who work in the industry because it is so much your life. So that part, like being relevant in your community and not like isolating yourself into oblivion is important. You probably noticed like I'm not like really a publicity like person. Like I don't have that stuff. I do think that like that stuff affects the bottom line though. I could make way more money if I tooted my horn more. I've made like 5 films, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Most of which have gone to every festival, and so like I do know that in this second phase after my like whole dramatic Coogan account situation, maybe I should, think about how do you craft that narrative and all those things in an authentic way that doesn't make you want to throw up in your mouth. Like, I do think that's important. And like, there's something to it, but I also feel like you can only do it to the extent that you're going to be happy with yourself. Because I think there's relevancy in the now, like in the short term, like, and then there's relevancy in the long term. And I think your community creates the relevancy that you'll have over the long term. Your community is what's going to sustain your relevancy over time.
Amazing. Well, we do have to wrap it up, which I'm sad about because I like talking to you.
I like talking to you too.
But if someone wants to create a life or create a career path for themselves that mirrors yours in some way, right? It would never be identical. What would you say are the steps that they should be taking today to get there?
I would say don't have an exit plan. Like don't go home because again, it's really, I guess it all to me really goes back to your community. Like as you expand your community and you continue to work, even if it's not exactly what you want to do, you'll find yourself being the only person left to do it at some point. I just unfortunately went to a funeral for a friend's wife from AFI. We've been out of AFI for about 10 years now. And everybody's there. And everyone's like, it took 10 years, but now I'm doing X, Y, and Z. But like if they'd gone home, that wouldn't have been the story they would have been able to tell. So I think it's about trusting that what you have to say is valid and valuable. What you have to contribute is real and is not defined by anyone else but yourself. And sticking around, I think, is what I would say to do. Like, keep doing things.
Yeah, I mean, they say it takes at least 10 years to make an overnight success. So I would agree. Stick with it. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
And that's this week's episode. Thank you so much for tuning in and doing this life thing with me week after week. I hope you have a good rest of your week. If you like the show, please subscribe, rate, review wherever it is you get your podcast. Tell a friend, tag a friend, and hit me up on the socials. I'm at Carolina Gropa. The show's at Life with CACA. Thank you so much. And I'll see you next week. Beijos.